Hello and welcome back to Biology for Beginners. As always, I'm your host, Morgan. This week we're going to continue looking at the cell and the organelles within the cell and start to talk a little bit about the organelles that specialize in converting energy. As always, to start out with, we're going to have our terms and definitions slides popping up in frame here. So if you feel so inclined, feel free to pause the video and grab those terms and definitions so you can be caught up on the vocabulary you will be hearing in this video. Or if you want my entire PowerPoint presentation in PDF format, pop on over to my Patreon where it is available for absolutely free. However, patrons do get the Biology for Beginners video and all study material to go along with it a day early. So without further ado, let's talk about energy. The first organelle we're going to talk about today is the mitochondria. Now, I'm sure that most people that have at least gone through the American education system can parrot back the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And that's about what they remember from middle school or high school biology class. But what exactly does this lovely little phrase that anyone familiar with meme culture knows? Well, let's get a little bit into that. The mitochondria itself is an organelle within eukaryotic cells that's enclosed in a double membrane. So it's got that outer and that inner membrane with an inner membrane space. And then inside the inner membrane is where that mitochondrial matrix is and all the interesting things happen. So in this mitochondrial matrix, you have the mitochondrial DNA, ribosomes, and all those enzymes that catalyze cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is this process where the cell can break down the food molecules and harvest the ATP that helps to run all of the rest of the processes that the cell must carry out. So yes, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell in that it takes the chemical energy stored in food and breaks it down into a form that is actually useful for the biological processes of the cell. But we'll get a little bit more into the specifics of those processes in another video a few chapters down the line. Right now, we're just kind of taking a brief walk through the cell, and we're going to continue on to the next energy organelle, which is the chloroplast. The chloroplast is unique in that you're only going to find it in these eukaryotic cells that carry out photosynthesis. The chloroplast is the place where photosynthesis happens, and this is the process by which the plants and algal species harvest that energy from the sun and then convert it into the chemical energy stored in food or used in the form of ATP. So like the mitochondria, chloroplasts are enclosed in a double membrane with an outer and inner membrane. But unlike the mitochondria, they're a little bit more complex because the processes they carry out have a few more steps and are a little bit more complex as well. But like I said before, we will get into that in a later video a few chapters down the line. So inside the inner membrane of the chloroplast, we're going to have a thick fluid known as the stroma. In the stroma, we're going to have that chloroplast DNA, the ribosomes, and a bunch of enzymes as well. But also inside the stroma, suspended there, are going to be the thylakoids. The thylakoids are kind of like these little flat discs that are arranged in stacks. Each stack is called a granum, or plural, they are called grana. Now, in the thylakoids is where the chlorophyll that actually captures that energy from the sun is being housed and certain reactions are taking place. Now, again, like I mentioned a moment ago, we will get into these reactions in later videos as they can be a little complex to comprehend and they're a little bit beyond what we're talking about today in our video. I'm sure if you've been following along closely up to this point, you heard me mention that in those kind of inner jelly-filled areas of the mitochondria and chloroplast, that they have the mitochondrial DNA and the chloroplast DNA. Well, the interesting thing about the DNA in these particular organelles is that they're circular, like the DNA of prokaryotes. So that begs the question of how did this DNA get there and how did these organelles get into the cells? Well, this is kind of answered in the Endosymbion Theory. And what this theory kind of describes is at some point in time, we had this big cell that was the ancestral eukaryote cell that at some point engulfed a smaller prokaryotic cell. If we're thinking about the mitochondria specifically, it was a cell that was utilizing oxygen. Now, it's possible that these cells formed a symbiotic relationship, meaning it was beneficial to both organisms. And so the smaller prokaryotic cell lived inside that host cell, the larger ancestral eukaryotic cell, and then eventually through enough time they evolved into one organism, and it was a very similar process with the chloroplast. And so the gist of it, if what I kind of said just now is a little bit word salad to you, is big cell engulfed little cell, enough time happened, and now we have one organism with these two little organelles that still have their own distinct DNA that differs from the rest of the organism, however, is still passed on to the offspring. And that is basically the leading idea of how mitochondria and chloroplast happen to pop up into the eukaryotic cells. And it's also a bit of an explanation as to why they have this double membrane as well. But there's a little bit more nuance to that theory that we're not going to get into today. This is just the gist of it, and these are the energy converting organelles that I am sharing with you in this particular video. So we are reaching our end here, and I do hope that you've learned a little bit more about the mitochondria and kind of understand why it's the powerhouse of the cell and are excited to learn more about the chloroplast. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, evening, what have you, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you again for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell if you would like to see more. And if you'd like to follow me on any of my other social medias, the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to check out thereptilegoth.com for all of my articles and blog posts. If you found any value in this video and you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon page. That link is also in the description down below. And a special thanks goes out to my Diamond Dragon patron, Diane B. What you're doing is really helping me fund a dream here. I will see you guys all in the next one.